Hello, welcome to my talk. As Daniel said, my name is Giuseppe. I work in Germany at Trivago, even though I'm originally from Italy. Trivago is an auto search website, and my role as test automation engineer means that I work mainly on testing framework and test automation integration for the web application, sometimes also for some backend services, like, for example, we have a gateway, GraphQL, federation that involves many microservices. The topic today, and this is the agenda, is about A/B testing, and I will briefly introduce the concept in the scope of web applications and what it means for test automation strategy. We will see both what we started doing 10 years ago in this sense, what didn't go as well as we wanted, and what we did since then to improve things. And we will look at the different phases of the software development life cycle and how the test automation has to also be consistent with an approach that includes variants. I will show some quotes. And we start with one that is not from someone in the tech field. It's actually by a poet and painter. And it's a quote from a book of 1788. The true method of knowledge is experiment, and all progress is by experiment. And that introduced the concept of A/B testing. As in the screen we see, okay, I had to fit in one slide to crop the parts of a web page, where you see the default of a calendar on our web application, with two different buttons to select check-in and check-out, and the string that shows the full date, including the year. What we see down here is instead a variant that was shown only to a part of our visitors, where the button is unified, check-in, check-out, and the string shows a date and an abbreviation for the month. A/B testing is the process of showing to a part of the traffic one version and to another part the second version, with appropriate tools in place to measure the effects, in terms of KPIs, in terms of business metrics, and also of interactions. It can be like not a direct business result, not monetizable, but can be something that we want to know about the user experience. This can apply to a web application, can apply, of course, to many other things. Like the concept of A/B testing can go back hundreds of years if we look at science in general as experiments. But yeah, if we talk about web applications, Google was doing it in 2000 already. And then, since then, I think many companies do it. You can think about, for example, WhatsApp or Facebook and a feature that you saw, but a friend of yours didn't have in his version of the application. So, A/B testing in web applications is something that Trivago does since long. And it's a powerful methodology to compare the different versions of the application, as we said, in the live environment with real traffic. So to gather data that is used to decide on things without just rely on assumptions. We are a company that is heavily data-driven, and then any product decision has to be brought up and then have a proof in terms of results. This allows us to measure it before rolling out to the traffic, to the all traffic. And besides that, it can also be a way to mitigate risks, which means, yeah, the risk of losing money because this version is not as well performing as the original, as the default, but also, I don't know, in terms of monitoring errors, because you can display a version to just a very tiny part of the traffic, like 2% of the traffic, for example, and monitor what happens. Or you can also, in the age of AI, monitor how much it costs to run a feature that maybe consumes tokens on some LLM. In Trivago, the A/B testing setup is called C-tests, and I actually don't know why, but I can imagine that after A and B comes C, and then we chose that because we don't have just two versions. We have, right now on the web application, probably 100 different variants running at the same time. I mean, 100 A/B tests that then are combined and then exponentially are a huge amount of variants. This brings us to what it means for test automation, what it means in terms of test automation strategy. And the quote is that hope is not a strategy. So you need to think about what you need to do for the test automation of such web variants. What we first thought 10 years ago, when we had to face this exponential increasing amount of combinations, was that, first of all, there are different types of C-tests, of A/B testing in Trivago. We had those that require a bit less effort, that we call experiments, where actually, for example, the development will not mean doing everything perfectly, integrating this in the application code in the best possible way. It has to be done, it's done fast to gather data and not in the final production-ready version that will be there forever. It's just a version to release and gather some data. Or we have full-fledged features that are kind of expected to be accepted. Like the strategy is to go in that direction, and we are still A/B testing them to measure the results. So in these cases, the effort is different, and maybe also the focus to put on that is different. But what we were thinking back then was just that, yes, that we had to be sure that the quality of this had to be always very good in each variant, that we had to have a very wide test automation in place, end-to-end test automation. That was what we started about 10 years ago, to have a framework developed in-house based on Selenium and Cucumber, to have test automation. And yes, we thought we will just have, since it's coded in Java, decorators for each component. We use a page component model. And these decorators, which is a design pattern, will allow us to have the tests running with any possible variant and still work, still use the correct locator, use the correct functionality, which maybe was a bit ambitious. Like, it was like the idea of having a silver bullet, and to quote again, I use too many quotes, but I really like them, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I say, OK, let's do this. This is an example of how, back then, 10 years ago, the decorator would look, the interface, and then how to load the norm, the underscore norm class, or the one with the ID of the variant. Was that a good idea? Actually, it showed a divide between those, or, I mean, the idea of creating tools, adopting tools, and then the real needs of those who have to employ them. In our case, so back then also structurally, the organization in QA was different, and we had the team, release and test automation team, that was only focused on creating the frameworks, maintaining them, versus a QA team with QA engineers that were doing the exploratory testing, were using the frameworks and adding tests. And there was not enough intersection and connection between these, so that the actual requirements and the actual capabilities were not well shared. So what happened is that the strategy wasn't really there before creating the tool. The tool was created, and then let's use it. And yeah, we didn't think if the structure that we thought about was really maintainable, like with this idea of so many variants, or also maybe thought if the components within different variants would be still a component that makes sense to just decorate, or it would be completely different UI. And at the same time, we didn't ask beforehand how many possible variants there would be, or how many resources in terms of time for the QA engineers to focus on this. Do we have to test all the possible combinations like together, which would be a huge amount? And also, yeah, we do this in the test, in the end-to-end tests, because we're developing this in-house framework and thinking, oh, it's so cool, we have our own framework, we can do whatever we want. But did we think about these variants that don't affect only the UX, but it can be a variant that just changes a color in a button, so it's purely visual, or a variant that changes the backend. So we are an auto search website. The ranking of the autos displayed can be changed by a variant in the backend, but that's not something strictly in the scope of the end-to-end tests. And that's when, we understood this was a case of you ain't gonna need it. Like this structure with decorators was really something that nobody needed in that particular way. We ditched it. We really had to refactor things and think about it from a different point of view. Which brings us to another quote. This is from someone in the testing field, Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin, that are very well-known also authors. Testing is not just about finding bugs. It's about understanding the whole system and how it delivers value. Yes, so we thought we needed a holistic approach. And then I will also use a word that I personally don't like so much, especially in terms of quality assurance, which is compromise. But it's what we had to face. We had to compromise between our objective of quality, or quality within also all these variants. Some of them developed very quickly, released very quickly, and the constraints of time, of cost. Then we started adding features, first of all, to our end-to-end framework. For example, since it's based on Cucumber, add a tag that allows us to specifically write a test that we run with the additional variant active. So a tag like run with ctests, which will then provide an ID after the tag, and will apply this variant when the specific scenario runs. So in this case, we are not touching the whole test suite, but just focusing on one test. Then we thought, OK, we can also have tests that test all the variants at once. Yeah, all variants at once is not a common case, but at least we know that this way we will catch any conflict between a variant and another. So again, of course, your application has to support all this. Like you have to have some ways to activate this, so some URL parameters, something. It's a work to do together with the development teams. And then we also said, OK, we can also run the whole test suite. We can provide a variant ID as an argument. So it's a run argument. We run all the tests. We leave this to the QA engineer to decide when this makes sense, not just constantly in a test grid that would be like as big as a data center if you would want to run continuously on every pull request all the combinations. And then we have, anyway, a scheduled automatic testing of each single variant. We thought, as we said, there's some constraints are the resources. In the weekend, we considered, oh, on a Saturday, we don't really use our test grid. Why don't we run all the tests in the test suite with each variant, and then after half an hour, another one, and so on. And that also helped us get some feedback in a bit async, but still in a way that is compatible with our time and cost constraints. And then we said, OK, we also have to focus beyond the front end, beyond the end-to-end tests, and do something else. So here is just a screenshot, just to understand that we gave the possibility to run the test with the variant applied. So we have the comment-based, for example, test run that the QA engineer on a pull request in GitHub can just leave a comment. We have a bunch of different arguments to run these tests in different ways. And one of the options is to add or remove a variant, because there's a certain stage when a variant is given to the 100% of the traffic, but is still behind the feature flag. So you can even remove that. And then we go further in what we did to look at what we did to catch issues earlier in the variant development. This quote says, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And to me, it looks very appropriate to talk about shift left, that I think everybody should know means testing earlier in the software development life cycle. So to test, in this case, the variant in isolation. For example, of course, new unit tests are needed when a variant is created, where there is a new separate component, which is the case most often. For example, we have visual testing that we introduced at component level. So again, giving the power to the developers to already add this kind of test coverage while they're creating new components. And this is based, for example, on Storybook, which is a tool to display components in isolation. So for example, our React components, they get displayed in isolation. And then with the visual testing, we test them automatically one by one. So by adding to Storybook the component, the developer already is also adding this to the visual test. It doesn't have to write any test because we iterate automatically through all the components. And then we also noticed the cases where there were variants that required the new services, new microservices, because as I said before, we use as a query system for our backend, GraphQL Federation, and there new services can be added at any time. So GraphQL allows to read data from multiple data sources, and there are many cases where there is a new feature, and the team in charge of GraphQL just get asked to create a new service, a new endpoint that will provide a certain data aggregated. They can very quickly create such services. And at the same time, now they can add karate tests, as we set up a very complete karate-based test framework within GraphQL. So they can already cover these microservices with the tests when they are creating these new ones. Here, I can just show a couple of examples. And when we're talking about the unit test, it's like the developers, of course, it's a decision of software development teams that they create new components and they are in subfolders of the web application within folders that are based on the ID, Jira ID in our case, because we use Jira for our ticketing system, and it's called Jira, as you might all know, because it's based on Godzilla in Japanese. Yeah, there are unit tests, just tests within these folders, and it's enforced. So yeah, we moved a bit of the responsibility on the developers, which should always be the case for the unit tests to be there. And as I said, we have this Storybook visual tests. Again, I wanted just to show that the names of these components includes the ID, because exactly this is a variant. We have a similar slide out rooms detail, this list of amenities for a room, because our website shows hotels, also as a default. But this one is the version for the variant 70344. So once this is created in Storybook, this will be, first of all, added to the baseline screenshots. For this, we use Playwright. And then, in each pull request, this test we run and compare also the variant. We are just not testing the baseline versus the baseline, also the variant versus the variant, with a minimum effort, basically almost no effort. And then we come to the next slide. And here we quote someone that is considered the father of quality engineering, William Deming. In God we trust, all others must bring data. To introduce the opposite of the previous approach, but also something we do, shift right. So go, again, far from the test front end, end-to-end, and focus everything there. As we said before, we have a bit of shift left to test earlier or test at a different level, and bit right to test what happens once this variant is released. And we release many variants every day because we have a very well-oiled continuous deployment system. Our QA engineers work a lot to also do exploratory testing on new features, and then these features get released and activated every day. And what we have at our disposal to check this? Real-time monitoring and data analysis tools. So we use some open source or commercial solutions. So here I mentioned, for example, Kibana or Grafana that we use to monitor errors, but also to monitor some of the business metrics, because we can immediately see if there is a decrease of some key KPIs in terms of business. I forgot to mention others, like Sentry, for example. If there are JavaScript errors like in the application, we can also get immediately notifications. And then we have some internal tooling as well, which is very important if you want to run A/B tests. We have to have measurement. It's called the release controller. It allows to analyze each variant. And again, of course, it focuses first of all on the most important business metrics. So you have the real difference in terms of money, of revenue for the company, and also then in much more detailed subgroups and cases. And it means that within 24 hours, so in the next business day, not only the product people, but also our QA engineers have access to all these metrics, and also access to all the user interactions. Because besides the business metrics, we have also details like we release those, for example, that different calendar that we saw before. What did it lead to in terms of times the calendar is opened or closed, of selection of dates? We can see it very well between the control and test group. So that's also an aid to exploratory testing when something doesn't go as well as we want, when something looks wrong. It's already an aid to understand where we should focus in checking and finding a problem. So as this is a screenshot of the release controller that I mentioned before, you can see you have data is fake because my company wouldn't allow me to show the real one. But you can see the logged in sessions, for example, or the interactions with the check-in or check-out button, and so many other things like Google hotel ads, incoming traffic. It's very detailed. This is just a little snapshot. As I said, the data is not even true. And there we approach what happens next. So next means, let's say that a variant gets accepted. Most of the times they get rejected, and the developers are sad because they worked and their code goes thrown into the bin, but that's life. When it gets accepted, as the only constant in life is change, we change the default of our application for our visitors. And that becomes the new normal. So the variant accepted. What's next? So we have to update the end-to-end test regression suite very often. It means like the variant acceptance will cause some failure, will cause some incompatibility. And we have, as I said, previously tested this. Like weekends, we also on demand, we test this variant. So we should know already what we'll have to do. Our QA engineers will work on adapting the tests straight away when this new default variant is accepted. Actually, they will work even before, like once the data analysts, the product people say, okay, this looks good, we will go from 50% of the traffic to 100% tomorrow. By tomorrow, the QA engineer will have adapted all the tests as required. And next, even more to think about what this means, we will have an automated Jira task creation for the variant acceptance, because yeah, the basic cover is one thing, but we might want to give even a better coverage. We then have a recurring review of the test suite, which means that this also asynchronously has to happen. Like with so many variants and so many changes, we have to sit every 6 months or something to look at the whole test suite and see what still makes sense or not. Here, a couple of screenshots just to understand. This is what happens in the weekend. We get notifications in Slack. This variant was tested for mobile, desktop, only desktop, depends where it's active for the traffic to the users. And these are everything is green, or there are some failures. This is the feature file location. You can rerun, you can analyze it, and then you can access reports and see more about the failures. And the last, as I said, a task creation. The task is a template that tells you, OK, look into what is needed to be done. Look in if what has been done so far is enough when you thought that this was just a variant. Now this is the real current version of the website. We need to be sure that everything is properly covered by test automation. And with this, I reach the end of the Q&A session. I thank you for your attention. It's my first ever public speech at a conference, so I hope it was good enough. Thank you very much.
Yes, it was good enough. And let's check the questions. OK, first question. Do you feel it is more important to focus on shift left or right in this mindset?
Yeah, so let's say that the shift right, in our case, I think it's a bit less effort. Because as I said, we have good tools in place. So worst case, in 24 hours, we see if this variant is creating a damage of minus 20% of revenue. And of course, the approach is also not to activate a variant for 50% of the traffic straight away. We activate, I don't know, for 5%, for 10%, depending on the risk involved. So that's a less effort. That could be an answer. I think they're both important. Like as I said, the shift left means that you avoid the worst case scenario. You release and you see errors everywhere. So a bit of a balance. Let's say shift left, a minimum is needed. Shift right is already there, so it's no effort. I mean, in our case. And if you still have to implement these things, I think, again, shift right. You do set up something, and it's something that will be there and you can keep using.
Next question. How do you do visual testing? Is it automated?
Yes, as I said, it's automated since it's very much automated. Like when you add there's a new component in our web application, the developers really doesn't have to write a test because in this case, it's visual testing as a comparison. Since we have a storybook as a tool that allows to show these components alone with the fixtures, it uses fixtures so the data is also not changing because, I mean, we also have visual tests for a result list composed of many different hotels, everything, but we have those that have components in isolation because this way it's always stable and it's very easy to maintain also.
Okay, what tool would you suggest to start with?
Oh, what in what scope? Because we talked about a lot. For example, I mean, even though for the end-to-end tests we currently use a framework based on Selenium, I would say Playwright can cover both your end-to-end tests and, as I said, also the visual tests, and is more accessible if you don't have like a large experience. I would say you could start with that and already cover a bunch of things, especially if you add also Storybook, and then you have this component isolated.
Okay. Is there any way to detect issues related to something which works the same on different variants, but it shouldn't?
So basically, this variant is not really doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, this actually could happen. Like, I mean, I suppose that sometimes. So, for example, in our system, in the data analysis tool in the release controller, we also have a sentence that is called a variant is called placebo because in reality it doesn't do anything, and we want to monitor that the data is stable. Like, it does not show that this variant that doesn't do anything is going so well. So the opposite problem, yeah. I'm not sure you can detect issues related to something. It's still down to the QA engineer. That I mean, we have our QA engineers doing also a lot of exploratory testing besides the test automation. So when a new feature is released with a very clear requirements, hopefully, then they also should be sure that this works. Actually, it's much part of our exploratory testing is about these new features and these variants, because of course, for the base version, its use case of regression tests of automation is very strong, and you have a very large test suite.
Okay, the last question. What tool do you use for user behavior tracking in your shift-right process?
No, as I said, it's first of all, the application sends certain tracking data to some endpoint. It's also, again, a service in GraphQL, and there's behind there are some Kafka streams. This is developed in-house, maintained in-house. As I said, it uses these tools, but like but the structure itself of the data tracking is developed in-house. I'm sure there are also commercial solutions, but in our case, since it's something that Trivago does since it's the start, like 20 years, yeah, we keep maintaining that, and we have only an internal data system.
Okay, so we are out of questions, and I think you really deserve another round of applause, as this was your first appearance.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe.
Thank you.